Well, if you have been a football player, especially at the quarterback position over the last 2 years or so, you've likely been the source of conversation from Cam Newton, whether it's catching strays or praise. Especially, we talked earlier this year about Cam, discussing bringing the game manager versus what was it, difference maker,
Yeah.
or
And you're
game
talking about
changer
Dak Prescott.
versus game manager, yeah. But he's been in the news now over the past 24, 48 hours for something not as lighthearted, if you will. Cam Newton getting into a fight at a youth event of all places, a 7-on-7 for anyone under, I think it's like between like 15 and 17 years old, getting into a scuffle with apparently the management team from one of the companies that put on the promotion and handles all of that stuff. Apparently, there's cameras catching those people walking up to him, and all of a sudden, a fight ensues, and it's Cam Newton taking on like 3 or 4 guys. I haven't seen the actual video, but there's been some reporting on this. But yeah, just Cam Newton enjoying retirement, apparently.
Well, he's not a game manager when it comes to fighting 4 dudes.
No.
He's a game changer because he handled those guys. I mean, he's a giant human being. But this is one of those weird, like, par for the courses. There was a couple years ago when Cam was with the Patriots. Remember, he was at his own camp, and there were kids talking, like, shit to him, and he had to basically be like, there was, like, and he kind of was challenging these kids, like, I'm here to try to help you. You're at my camp. Like, if you want to be like the dick, basically, like, you can leave. You don't have to be here.
Yeah,
but there's something with Cam Newton that he brings. I think that's just because when he played, he was always controversial, and just the fact that at his highs, he was an MVP, and at his lows, at times, he was a guy that, we struggle with finding a place in the league because you just couldn't throw the ball accurately, especially late in his career after the shoulder injury. So he was a polarizing just figure in general. And it's crazy that he is a
confrontational guy.
Yeah, he's a guy who doesn't back down. And I wouldn't, if I was Cam Newton. You're worth a lot of money. You're very, very big and strong. And I guess it's he everything that he does comes with a tinge of controversy, whether it's his own font that he creates, his weird, wacky style and hats and everything. But I'll just say this. Maybe Cam Newton should take some time away from the camps. I think maybe he can stick to the podcasting with Brandon Marshall and stay on TV. I think he's good on TV and he's entertaining and fun to watch. Like, just
he is. He's a good job.
Stop getting into fights with multiple other large human beings.
Yeah, 2 former athletes with podcasts. Richard Sherman also getting into some issues too this past.
This is not his first rodeo with alcohol too, because wasn't it the
That's
alcohol
right.
that they
When
said
he was outside of the house
that led to him being outside the house, where he basically had to have the cops called on him, arrested for like trying to break and entry, but also like domestic violence. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was like against his spouse. It was like against his own family, and they were like basically like, police, you need to help us because he's a big and strong and out of his mind. So Richard Sherman, he might need to go on the Patrick Mahomes Sr. like, you got to cut it off here type of plan here.
Another confrontational and polarizing figure from the NFL and from the same era.
Cam just doesn't back down and will run and not afraid. If you run your mouth there on Cam, he'll throw it back at you.
Yeah, exactly. So that was an interesting tidbit as we launch ourselves into this show. But of course, you saw it. If you clicked on it on YouTube, and the title, of course, of this episode being "What Should the Bears Do with the Top Pick?" We've got the Bears Stanley. Is that a Stanley mug?
Well, it's a knockoff,
whatever you call it,
from Sam's Club.
Knockoff Bears.
This one has more lead in it than the average Stanley.
Yeah, there you go. Beautiful. Kind of like the Bears organization in general. Just a little bit behind the times in terms of getting up to regulation standards, for sure. But the Bears have an opportunity to change all that and potentially take a quarterback to change the direction of their franchise, or perhaps they have one in their own building. A lot to discuss here as we get into this episode. Really excited for this one. I think we've been waiting for it for a good portion of this past season. And of course, now that we have started the offseason talk, Mark, you being resident Bears fan on this show, A lot of people, I think, really excited to hear your thoughts. You've kind of sprinkled in some things throughout the last couple of months, but we haven't fully heard your take on this situation and fully flesh it out. So really looking forward to this one. So
I'm ready.
We'll have a couple news and notes before we launch into it, but here we go. Looking forward to this one. Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears are on the clock. What will they do? All right, the NFL draft a couple months away. We've got the combine later this week, going into the
2
weekend. So yeah, it's a little bit of ways away, but of course it's going to be here before we know it. We talked on the last episode that the window to franchise tag players opened, and T. Higgins, the Bengals, who we weren't sure if they're going to be able to afford him. What was going to happen with all of that, but T. Higgins gets franchised by the Bengals. I think it's a great move.
Great move.
Something to really. We had talked about how who was the group that was able to overcome Mahomes in the AFC and get to the Super Bowl. It was Joe Burrow, Chase, and T. Higgins. You didn't want to break up that trio, especially with how dynamic they can be, and especially with Burrow coming off of an injury, maybe wanting to get everything in terms of a comfort level to start 2024. This is the way to do it. So a win for the Bengals, win for T. Higgins. He gets his guaranteed money, and he'll be able to get the bank next year, or maybe they'll franchise him again. But right now they locked him up.
Yeah, they still can negotiate now with him. Yeah. I think it was great of the Bengals. You see a lot of teams, I think they should take advantage of this more, because if you sell it, the franchise tag, the kind of the way the Bengals are selling it to T. Higgins is basically like, you're not going anywhere. We love you. You're amazing. So we're going to use this to hold you here no matter what. And because how much we love you. But now now we can take our time and find if we can come to an agreement on a long-term deal. But just know you're not going anywhere. Like, I kind of wish the Bears would do that with Jalen Johnson. Like, they know they want to keep Jalen Johnson. So just like put that tag on him right away and be like, we love you. You're not going anywhere. You're amazing. Now let's come to the table. And, if you spin it in that way, as opposed to a lot of players see the tag as like, oh, they tag me. It's a bad thing. It seems like the Bengals are using it to their advantage to try to like keep the peace with T. Higgins. And I think T. Higgins is one of the 3 or 4 players that when you look at the big free agency possibility, he's one of those guys where if you're a fan of that team and T. Higgins is not playing in your uniform next year, you're like, this is a disaster. Like, that's like how I feel with Jalen Johnson. That's how I feel with T. Higgins with the Bengals, the Bears with Jalen Johnson. Brian Burns with the Carolina Panthers. Like, if he's playing another uniform next year, that's a disaster. Like, you're a young team that is not spending any money in your quarterback. Like, you've got to keep some talent there. You've got to build and homegrown.
Well, especially
talent.
after they apparently got offered multiple firsts for him just a year ago. Like, you can't then let him walk.
And so there's a couple others. Michael Pittman Jr. He's like, it feels like no. Like, and a tag for him is great because he's been a little injury prone. So you get him for the next year to see if he can build chemistry with Anthony Richardson. And then if he has a great year and he's healthy the whole year, then you can maybe sign him to a long deal. So those are there's a handful of players. I'm thinking I know 1 or 2 others out there that I'm missing, like a Josh Allen with the Jacksonville Jaguars, where it's like, hey, that defense can't afford to take another step back. He's a homegrown talent. You gotta make sure he stays in uniform for another year. That it makes sense. So good on the Bengals, good on T. Higgins. I love knowing already as a fan that I get a healthy Joe Burrow with his 2 weapons next year. Because, again, if you're trying to create that drama, that storyline of who can beat the Chiefs, having T. Higgins stay there is monumental for those storylines going into next year.
And as great as Jamar Chase is, there would inevitably be questions about, okay, well, if he's the lone guy, then that defenses have to worry about.
Yeah.
Are the Bengals going to have some issues there and need other guys to step up? They won't have to worry about that. They've got their great number 2, really 1B in that offense in T. Higgins. Go ahead.
Matt Abike, the defensive lineman for the Ravens. He's the other one that hit me. Where it's like
big.
You can't afford to let him be in another jersey next year. You're in a win now mode, and he's a homegrown talent that is slowly just getting better and better. It's an underrated thing when you think about the franchise tag is you got to look at, do they fit the bill? Are they a homegrown talent, and are they getting better? And do they fit your win now mode? Like, you could argue Brian Burns doesn't fit the win now mode for Carolina, but you refused to trade him and you didn't get anything for him.
Yeah.
And you are not paying anyone else, and you need to eventually just start putting talent on your roster like that. So you can make the argument that he fits 2 of the 3 needs for sure.
All right, we'll hit a couple other hot button topics before we get into the main meat and potatoes of this one. But partly to do with what we just talked about with franchise tags, a lot of these teams maybe now will see a little bit more action in the coming days because we have the final answer as to what the 2024 NFL cap limit will be. And it has grown by $30 million to $255 million, an incredible $255.4 million. To be exact, that's the biggest jump in NFL history. For some context, in 1994, 30 years ago, it was $34 million. So it's grown by $220 million in the last 30 years. But even going back, Mark, to 2016, you pointed out, it was $155 in 2016. Yeah. So in this 8-year gap, it's grown $100 million. If you went to the previous 8 years before that, it was only $60 million jump. So it's growing exponentially. Obviously, a big part of that is teams had to take a big hit for a couple of years due to COVID, and the NFL has since not only grown, but really grown exponentially in the amount of money it's made the last year and a half to 2 years, and not to mention some of the savings that they got during those COVID years. So this was part of that too, and the teams are now getting rewarded with bigger wallets and more spending power. But that's going to obviously be very interesting to see what happens with this free agency market and with this franchise tag situation. Now that teams have a little bit more leeway and more clarity on how much money they're going to be able to spend. But that is a big number, $255 million. Holy
well, and again, there's a cap floor. So you have to spend at least, I think it's like 80% of that or something. So you can't just say, nope, we're going to save money. And what's exciting is so we complain about it during the season, right? Games on Amazon Prime and games on Peacock and YouTube TV getting the red zone and all that. So it's a little weird or kind of behind. This is now where you're seeing the benefit for the teams like a Saints who are in cap hell, and you're a fan of a team like my team, the Bears, who already made some moves in getting rid of Whitehair and Jackson and saving cap, and now the cap grows. Like you see, you can reap the benefits. And also, if you already have your quarterback signed to a long-term deal, this is huge. I mean, this allows you to like justify more of that Josh Allen deal, that Joe Burrow deal, because you can say to your fan base, hey, we know it's a lot now, but we believe the cap is going to grow exponentially. And hell, if it grows another 30 million over the next, I mean, it was this 1 year, but if it grows another 30 million over the next 2 years, those cap numbers, those cap hits are going to be inconsequential at this point in time for some of those big players.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a sizable portion of your team that's making over $20 million, a year, which was unthinkable even just like a decade ago to have that many $20 million guys. You could have 5-6 of them and not even have, much of a dent in your overall cap number. It's kind of
no, but it's not. It's also empowers the fans as well. If you are a Panthers fan, if you're a Ravens fan, go make sure you go sign someone. You have the money. There's cap, the cap is growing. Be aggressive. Get Brian Burns back in. Sign Madubuike. You know what I mean? Go out and be aggressive in the trade market. If you're the Kansas City Chiefs fans and you want to go get a number 1 wide receiver, you can make it work with this cap and that growth for sure.
Yeah, a lot of help to a lot of teams throughout the league. Final note before we get into the big discussion here on the Bears and that top pick. Longtime NFL writer, over 50 years in the industry, wrote for Sports Illustrated and had some of those famous writings where he would go on road trips with players and figures, John Madden being a notable one. Peter King, who for the last, I don't know how long, has been writing, Football Morning in America for NBC and Monday Morning Quarterback. Just a really, obviously, if you're a fan of the league, you know the name Peter King. You've seen him throughout. Does great work. He announced he is retiring, so we will be missing that coming here into the 2024 NFL season and beyond. Just kind of citing that it was time for him, and he also mentioned that the timing of this particular moment was, extra relevant because it was really about realizing that the combine, the week that it requires for a lot of these beat writers, he just was not willing to go through all of that late nights up 4 in the morning, having to do, specials and profiles on all of these different players and stuff. It just, he wasn't looking forward to it anymore. And great work.
Time.
So, yep, exactly.
I will say this about Peter King. He's one of those, he is the last of a really dead generation to where you were a writer first, and those were the most trusted names and opinions in sports, where he was able and comfortable doing some TV stuff. And you've seen it more recently in NBC since he made the switch to NBC, 5-6 years ago now. And he says retirement in quotes. I think you'll still see Peter King as a part of like the NBC overall sports team of people. Come Super Bowl week, come playoffs, you know what I mean? Once a year, he'll pop up and do a big interview for TV or something, especially with kind of historic perspective on things, for having covered, 40 straight Super Bowls actually at the Super Bowl. And in the column this morning, he did say, he's like, I'm excited to watch the Super Bowl on TV.
Exactly,
see the commercials. He's like, and that feels spoiled because it's like people would kill to go to a game. But he's like, when you've been to 40 straight, it's as great as it is. You also get that, like, how do other people view this sport, on television and everything else like that. Listen, Peter's a legend, but he's also one of those people that I couldn't stand. I can't stand at times, or because he's got those guys.
No, I hear you.
Because he's sourced so well, you have no way to fight against him, where you're like, oh God dang it, I hate what he's saying about so-and-so or this topic or my team, but I trust his sources, so he's got to be right. And then that angers you, because those are what the real journalists do. When Stephen A. Smith says something dumb about your team, you just go, oh, whatever, it's Stephen A. Like, who cares, But when Peter bashed your team, it hurt because it was sourced. He was behind closed doors. He has one of those rare, completely unfettered access to certain things. And so I won't be sad to miss out on Peter King, being in the draft room for the 49ers when they stole the Bears pick to make the Bears trade up to go get Trubisky, and he wrote a scathing column of how the Bears, were worked by the Niners, and I the next day was just trying to be excited about my quarterback and very angry at the same time because they were getting trashed. And it's a perfect segue into what we're talking about now. Time is a flat circle for me, because in his final column, Peter King drops, he believes the Bears are going to build around Justin Fields and trade the number 1 pick.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff, and what a way to go out with that little nugget there, which is, of course, the main topic on everyone's minds heading into the draft is what is going to happen with Caleb Williams and this number 1 overall pick. Not only is it the Bears with 2 consecutive years of number 1 overall pick, but it's also a moment where people are talking about a, once in a generation type of talent in Caleb Williams. Joel Klatt has come out kind of ranking since Andrew Luck. So that's been 12 years since Andrew Luck was drafted. Who's been the most, standout prospect? He has Caleb Williams ahead of Trevor Lawrence, which we thought, Trevor Lawrence was the guy a few years ago. So that just tells you kind of how high profile of a pick this one is, and a big decision for Ryan Poles, for the Bears brass, considering that they have hung on to Matt Eberflus. They have really kept a lot of this thing together to try and create some stability. So the question was, were they going to double down on that stability and keep Justin Fields and try to build around him? Peter King seems to think so, which would then beg the question as to what are the Bears going to get in return for this pick? Should they trade it? And what's going to be their strategy? Because it's one thing to just get the haul of picks.
Yeah.
You also have to make the picks last and actually get good players with those picks. You can't keep stockpiling. So curious on your thoughts first to the news that Peter King has dropped this, and what you think about his thoughts. And then also we'll get into just your overall thoughts on what the Bears actually should do with the top pick.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, Peter said in the column he had no sourcing on it, but his gut tells him that's what the Bears will do. And then later on, towards the end of the blurb, he says, well, he is hearing that the Bears will trade. But just Albert Breer, who replaced Peter King, the Monday morning quarterback, who's a great insider himself, was on ESPN 1000 in Chicago early this week, literally saying he believes this is the week the framework for a Justin Fields trade will get done. So you have two kind of powerhouses of the inside information basically saying back and forth. But I actually think they both can be right at the same time. Dan, I mean, I have a lot. I have a lot on this. So I will.
Yeah.
I like the way you phrased it. It was just like, what do the Bears approach this as? So I've struggled with this a lot. And to me, the most important thing, and I'll speak directly to all my fellow Bears fans, the most important thing is that our organization, the Bears, evaluate the pick and Justin Fields and all of the prospects and do all of the work first. So then you can properly weigh your scales, right? Then you properly can say, well, what is Justin Fields even worth? In order for us to know what Justin Fields is worth, the Bears have to this week at the Combine start asking people, what would you give for Justin Fields? Call the Steelers. What would you trade for Justin Fields? Call the Falcons. What would you trade for Justin Fields? That doesn't mean if those calls start happening, the Bears actually want to move on from Justin Fields. You just have to know what that value is, right?
Just
then
get
you have
more
to,
information. Yep.
Exactly right. Then you have to know, what do you value the prospects as? How do you value Marvin Harrison Jr.? How do you value Drake May? How do you value Caleb Williams, right? Gather all that information. Then you also make the calls to other people, say, hey, Washington, what would you give up for the number one pick? Hey, Raiders, what would you give up for the number one pick? So all of this needs to happen. And I'm confident they can do that because they literally just did it last year and did it successfully. Go back to last year. Remember, when the news broke in March that the Bears were trading the pick to the Panthers, and it was one of the earliest, the first overall pick had ever been traded. There was like a month to the draft because then remember, we spent all that time talking about the Panthers meeting with all the quarterbacks, right? Exactly. And then it was Bryce, and then there was that week where it was CJ Stroud, and that the coaching staff was saying you're our guy, and then it went back to Bryce. So they need to, in order for the draft to get moving, the Bears' decision has to happen. And so the NFL and other GMs are going to force it because they're going to get antsy. They're going to want to know, like, what are we doing here? Are you trading? Are you not? Where are you building? What are you building towards? So I'm confident the Bears can do that because Ryan Poles, like I said, did it a year ago, and he wasn't making the trade until they included DJ Moore. Remember, the reports were that the Panthers were willing to give up 2 first-round picks, but they didn't want more. And the Bears said, we don't care about that extra first-round pick. We want DJ Moore. And when the Panthers said, you got DJ Moore, the deal was done. So the only reason the Bears knew that they wanted DJ Moore for that and the valuation is because they had to go through all that framework, right? So that's number one. They have to get all of these information. So when you hear Albert Breer say on ESPN 1000 in Chicago, well, the framework for a Justin Fields deal could get done this week, that's a great sign. But it also means that Justin Fields could still be the Bears quarterback because you have to know what all the pieces are. So that's number one. Number two is, let me ask you a question. I think there are 7 teams in the NFL that need a quarterback. Like they cannot start next year without having made some sort of move, whether free agency, the draft, trade, without making some sort of move towards improving their quarterback position. Do you think the Bears are one of those 7 teams?
No.
I agree. So I put it to you this way. So we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
So if we agree that the Bears are not one of the 7 teams who are like they absolutely cannot go into next year without making a quarterback move. If I were to ask you, if the Bears did not have the number 1 overall pick and a mock draft came out today, well, Mel Kiper mock 3.0, and say the Bears just had number 9, And Justin Fields had the season he just had, and Matt Eberflus had the year he just had, but they're keeping him and all this stuff. What do you think the mocks would say about what the Bears would do at number 9?
Well, I think they would probably have him take, whether it's if Neighbors falls to 9 or if Brock Bowers falls to 9.
Yes, exactly right.
They would
you would say everyone would say, go get a weapon to help Justin Fields. He showed improvement. He did this. So you have to know that's going on. So what is it? What am I trying to tell you by asking you those questions? What I'm trying to tell you is the only reason the Bears are even people are standing on the desk for the Bears to draft Caleb Williams is because they have the luxury of the number 1 pick. Because of the way it happened a year ago with the Texans screwing up and the Bears making the right decision to keep Justin Fields over drafting Bryce Young.
Yeah, it changes everything.
It changed everything. So if the Bears didn't have this number 1 pick, we would not be discussing anything. It would be Justin Fields year 4. Can he show enough of improvement for them to pick up the 5th-year option to give him a long-term deal? You got to make the playoffs with Matt Nagy or else they clean house probably, right? You move on from Justin. You move on from Nagy, from Eberflus, and you go from there. But because you have the luxury of the number 1 pick, that means to me, if I was able to talk to Ryan Poles, and this is the platform I'm going to use it, I would say, I would hope and pray that Ryan Poles thinks of it that way, that they don't have the number 1 pick. Because if Ryan Poles goes through this process thinking he doesn't have the number 1 pick, you know what he will learn? When he talks to Caleb Williams, when he talks to Drake May, when he talks to Marvin Harrison Jr., when he talks to Jane Daniels and he meets with all them, when he watches all the film, when he meets with all his scouts, then he can sit there and say in his room with his trusted people, is there anyone we love enough to trade up from number 9 to number 1 to go get them? And if they sit there in the room and they say, we are willing to give what Carolina went from 9 to 1. So we are willing to give what Carolina gave us. This year's number 1, so number 9. Next year's number 1, and a star player. So insert a Darnell Wright or a DJ Moore. We're willing to give that up to go get Drake May because we love him that much. To go get Caleb Williams because we love him that much. If you at the end of the evaluation process you feel that, well then you just draft him because you don't actually have to give it up because you have the luxury of the pick, right? Does that thinking make sense?
100%. Absolutely.
So then on the flip side of that is if you meet with all those guys and you get all your scouts in the room, you've watched all the film, and if you all go, no, I wouldn't trade up. I wouldn't trade this year's first, next year's first, and DJ Moore to go get Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr., whoever. I wouldn't do it. I'm not sold on him. I didn't love that Notre Dame film. I really think he's kind of an emotional guy. I don't think he'd handle the market well. He's maybe not the size we want. So all of that. Then you say to yourself, okay, let's get on the phone and what are the deals out there that we can get for him? You know what I mean? Will someone offer us the big deals to make it worth our while to go forward with Justin Fields? And the third and yet small caveat to that will be, if someone loves Justin Fields enough to offer you enough of trade value to where you say to yourself, listen, I wouldn't trade up to go get Caleb, what the Panthers traded us to go get Bryce, but I really like him. I kind of like him a little more than Justin, just as a player, maybe not as a guy, but as a player. And shit, the Steelers are really willing to give us a first-round pick for him, or hey, the insert name here, the Commanders are really willing to give us our second back for Justin. That's when you say to yourself, whoa, I think we pulled the trigger then too, because if the valuation of what you can get for Justin is high enough, it also makes it a no-brainer.
Yeah.
The guys are smart in the locker room. Even though they all seem to really love Justin, if the Bears get a high second-round pick or a first-round pick, guys know, they're in the NFL, they know the value of that. Be like, damn, oh, all right, good luck to him, but that's great. We just got 3 first-round picks this year, and we got the top quarterback maybe since Andrew Luck by some prognosticators, and I like Joel Klatt. I believe him. He's played college football. He was a quarterback. No reason to doubt that he could be right on that. So, Dan, that's what I would argue. I just, to me, I haven't watched enough Caleb film yet to really get into would I pick him over Justin? And that's a process you and I will work on. So as we get closer to the actual draft and we'll do our draft shows, I'll have a firmer evaluation on that. But to me, it's very plain and simple. That is how the process needs to be evaluated. You have to just individually evaluate each thing. And if the Bears pretend they don't have the first overall pick, they will then really come to the clarity of what do we do with that number one pick? Because it has to be looked at as an absolute luxury.
Oh, 100%. And it's going to be what all intents and purposes, like people are talking about, is a more valuable, luxury than last year's top pick. And so then we're talking about, okay, well, we know what the Bears got, and a lot of us consider that to be a fleecing. But if we turned it on its head, that pick, see, this is the thing, is like when you're an NFL team, I think most GMs probably do this, is look at the pick as a player, not a commodity or not a asset, as just a pick, right? I mean, people do this in like dynasty fantasy football leagues and stuff. They're like, oh, I want the first round rookie pick next year because it's a first round rookie pick and those are great. But you got to think of it in terms of like who you got to put a player, a face to that pick. And so for the Panthers, they thought apparently at that time that Bryce Young was going to be the guy. At least that's the reporting. They were thinking Bryce Young equals 2 first round picks and DJ Moore. In our eyes, that's worth it. If we were a year removed now and they had taken CJ Stroud, I don't think we'd be talking about how the Bears fleeced Carolina.
If they got it right,
the Bears got a haul, and good on the Bears because they got a ton of great picks. But like, if you're the Panthers, I would do that all over again, right? And so, hindsight's 2020 in a lot of these situations.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about, I like how you put it in terms of how the Bears, can approach this and see, is the number one overall pick that we currently have worth it in terms of the player that we're going to get there? Do we think whoever we take at that spot is truly worth that spot? Because if you don't, then that's when you got to see, okay, well, who is willing to pay for that, or even pay a premium? Because most are going to have to pay that, what it's worth plus, because that's just the nature of competing markets. Then you go ahead and do that. The only caveat is maybe you don't think a player at the 101 is worth the 101, but they're fulfilling such a need for your team that the risk of not being able to fill that gap down the draft maybe then makes you say, okay, I'm willing to overspend, when you're, in this case, you're not even spending because you have it. You have the 101. So it's not like you're really spending anything to acquire said player. Then that's where it maybe gets a little dicey, and you're like, okay, well, we haven't had a true left tackle for 20 years, and this is the best left tackle we've ever seen ever. But we think that there are, other positions, whatever it may be. I'm rambling, but the point is, if they are in such dire straits for a quarterback, then you just get the best quarterback in the draft, because you don't get the 101 very often, and you don't know how in the future if you're going to be able to trade to get the prospect you want in the future. That's the weird question that the Bears are faced with right now, is because they aren't in a clear situation that they were a few years ago. They have a guy who can be their starting quarterback. And so it's not like they are the Washington Commanders right now, where it's like you clearly need a quarterback, even if you don't think Caleb Williams is the best prospect to come out in however long, and you don't think he's necessarily worth the first overall pick. You take him anyways because you need a quarterback. And if you don't hit, no one's going to fault you. So it is a very interesting, and I don't think it's a black and white issue for the Bears. But does the fact that the Bears have an opportunity to take a quarterback, one who at the very least, is probably you would feel pretty confident saying he will provide the production that Justin Fields has to this point. If you feel confident in saying that, is it worth it just because they get to reset the clock in terms of not having to pay this guy for 3 to 4 more years, whereas Justin's going to cost them a premium in the next year at the very minimum? If you could say you get Justin Fields all over again, would you do it?
Well, here's the thing. I think I do think it's overstated still on that you have to pay Justin Fields. He's entering his 4th year. You can still pick up his 5th-year option. Well, you pick up his 5th-year option, and then he can go. You still don't have to sign him to a long-term deal. So you have 2 more years of him under his current contract. And then you could always franchise tag him for 1 year. You know what I mean? Depending on his production and his value and where he's going. And again, if you trade the pick and stick with Justin, you're going to get enough picks to where if you have a quarterback you have your eye on in the next draft, if he fails, you can reset the clock. You know what I mean? You don't have to pay him.
Well, but it still takes 2 to tango. Like, you can't guarantee that you'll have a good enough package to present to a team because
but again, if Justin fails, the Bears pick will be high enough to get whatever, the quarterback they really need to they get, right? And I mean, listen, if it's so, again, going back to the I guess the initial question is, no, listen, what's crazy is I'm not anti Caleb Williams, and I'm not someone who doesn't. I wouldn't if the Bears end up just drafting Caleb Williams. There's going to be no one who's going to be a bigger Caleb Williams fan and stan than me. I will die for the man, just like I try to die for Justin Fields. So if the worst thing that happens to me in this scenario is that I end up with Caleb Williams, like the Bears.
That is what
the Bears are in such a great. That just shows you how great of a position they're in. Now, the problem with this is, and I will really harp on this point, and I've talked to my brother Phil about this, is, diehard Bears fan. And, he's someone I bounce a lot of ideas off of as well, just because he played the game at a college level and, just certain things. But I told him, I was like, my concern is, he had mentioned, like, well, what if the Bears really just love, like, Drake May? I think Drake May might be better than Caleb. You go with Drake May. The problem is, if the Bears draft Caleb Williams and Caleb Williams is never becomes a great player and kind of flames out, well, then you'll be able to just say, same old Bears. Bears just can't get it right. Yep. But if the Bears pass on Caleb Williams and they go with Drake May, or they go with Daniels or someone else, or J.J. McCarthy, or God knows who else, then it's, dude, Patrick Mahomes all over again. You went with Trubisky over Mahomes. You went with Drake May over Caleb Williams. How dumb are you? Dumbest franchise of all time. Yeah. Like, I would rather just die on the hill of the Bears just suck and they can't get the quarterback right than you pass on someone else. And if the Bears get a real haul, the online community will be less mean to the Bears if Caleb Williams ends up being a superstar, because the haul will be there. Like, the haul is going to be good enough to where it justifies the pick. Because, most likely to me, the trade scenario is you trade back to 2 or 3, you get a really haul for going from 1 to 2, say, and then you could even trade again. By the time the Bears are done with this, they could end up having 3 picks in the first round this year, and then 3 picks in the first round next year, if they play their cards right in this way. And that is such a haul to where no one is going to fault them, especially because Justin is talented enough. Justin has enough supporters. Peter King today, not Peter King, Peter Schrager said on Good Morning Football today, he believes the best scenario and the thing to do is build around Justin, trade back to 2, and then trade back again to Atlanta at like 8, and say, let Washington move up to 1, get Caleb Williams, get 2 and their next year's first and your second rounder back, and then go from 2 to 8 and get 8 and get Atlanta's next year's first and get Atlanta's second this year, or whatever. And then all of a sudden the Bears are picking at 8 and 9. and you're picking in the second round, 1, 2, and 3 basically in the second round of this year. And next year you have 3 firsts and 3 seconds. Like, that's an insane haul. Not all of them will hit, but even if half of those hit, that's 4 Pro Bowlers right there. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, that's an insane building. And then even if your quarterback, you struggle with your quarterback, that's the type of, then you plug and play. There'll be an unhappy guy somewhere who wants a new contract, and you go, you know what I mean? You go get them and you say, hey, Lamar Jackson, your contract's run up, or you want to, you then could do so much to where if Justin is not then elevating you to the next level, there are so many still options. And I believe that Justin is still capable of elevating to another level. And I will say this, Ryan Poles has to be criticized here as well, in the sense that he created this media storm of this monster that we're talking about, that the whole online community is talking about. Because if he would have fired Eberflus and gone all in on Harbaugh, or gone all in on Ben Johnson, or gone all in on Mike Vrabel, then they'd be drafting Caleb Williams. Like, if you had gotten the new coach, it's obvious, new coach, new quarterback, start them together, right? Like, that is what you do. But because he's stuck with Eberflus, and Eberflus is now in a win now mode, well, if I'm in a win now mode, if I'm at Eberflus, I'm leaning a lot towards, I've seen what happened to the last 2 guys who had this job before me. Their rookie quarterback, they were forced to start the rookie, and then they were fired a year later, and then they were looking for a job and buying a new house and moving their family. But I would be pushing hard I want Justin Fields. I want 2 first-round elite defensive pass rushers or something like that. I want all the picks you can give me, and let's try to go win 10 games and make the playoffs, because then no one's getting fired. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is Ryan Poles did this to himself. And so part of me believes that deep down, Ryan has always leaned towards, I want to keep Justin Fields. I like Justin Fields. I get the value in him. We just need to continue to do a better job supporting and surrounding him. The Chicago Bears haven't made the playoffs 3 straight years since before I was born. Like, that, there's no sustained success with this franchise. And I get it. Every fan base should be like, the Super Bowl's the goal. Just win a Super Bowl. And look at what Tampa's done. Since 2000, they've had a ton of shit years, but they do have 2 Super Bowl rings. That's really cool. Yeah. But I also wouldn't mind, I really wouldn't mind being the Pittsburgh Steelers for a while and making the playoffs for 5, 6, 7 straight years. And just being like, you know what? There's now an era where, hey, we're a couple tweaks away, like the Buffalo Bills are right now, where, yes, it sucks they didn't make a Super Bowl, but man, every year you go into it saying we're a tweak or 2 away. The Bears haven't been a tweak or 2 away for consecutive years for my lifetime. So it's a really important thing. And I do think the way you get that, the way you guarantee that you are feared as a roster and feared as an organization, like the San Francisco 49ers are right now, or like the Detroit Lions are building right now, is by trading for a haul and building in that way, shape, and form. So, it is where I lean. It's certainly where I lean. But I will be, I've said it before, I'll keep saying it. Yeah, I just trust in Ryan Poles to make the decision. And if he's thinking the way that I'm thinking, is that the number 1 overall pick doesn't exist for you, but it's this kind of like get out of jail free card either way, to where you would, if you fall in love with a guy, go draft him. I don't care if it's Marvin Harrison Jr. If you fall in love with Marvin Harrison Jr. that much that you go draft him, then just fine, just take him, right? Mm-hmm. But like, have that conviction. And if you don't fall in love with May, Harrison Jr., Williams, whoever it is, then have the conviction to go get the best deal possible. And maybe the best deal possible is only 1 trade back, and you still get to draft Marvin Harrison Jr., right?
Right.
And so maybe that is the best deal possible for the Chicago Bears. I'm not 100% sure yet, but I do think that Ryan Poles will figure out what he believes is the best deal possible, because I've seen him do it last year. He got the best deal possible. It was such a good deal, he literally gets to do it again this year. And so, I trust that he can make those right decisions. And so I think the rest of the league is going to pressure him, because they want to know. GMs don't like being in the dark. GMs want to have plans, and they want to be certain with what their plan could be. And as long as the Bears still have the number 1 pick and Justin Fields, there will be uncertainty until the night before the draft. We will be talking about this for 2 straight months. If they still have Justin Fields or they stand and they still have the number 1 pick. If they trade the pick, keep Fields, all the intrigue for the most part is done. If they trade Fields, all the intrigue is done. But until one of those 2 things happens, this will be what dominates the draft for the next 2 months.
One of the less discussed possibilities in this whole scenario is that the Bears trade back 1, 2, 3 spots, whatever it is, get a pick or 2 in return, and then still take a quarterback. What if they? Let's say for just as a hypothetical here, that they see the gap between Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels to not be terribly significant,
but
and they're
bigger,
like, yes,
but higher upside than Fields. So you're in this scenario. Okay.
Yeah, like they'll say, okay, Caleb is definitely the better quarterback prospect, but we can get someone who's a little bit more raw, but someone we believe in, and someone that we think, has Justin's skill set. What if we get him, but also still acquire 2 picks in the process, and we still have pick number 9 to get this?
And you would trade Justin for picks, presumably, or a player.
Or you keep Justin this year and let him go next year, and you say this guy takes a year where he's not playing. Like I'm just saying they could go that route.
The only scenario I would be mad at my team is if they have Justin Fields and a rookie quarterback in camp next year, unless that rookie is 4th round or later.
Down, yeah.
Because you should take quarterbacks every once in a while just to take quarterbacks, right? So that's the only reason. The only scenario I'm mad at the Chicago Bears is if they do that. If you have Justin Fields and a top 3 round quarterback draft like that, to me is then you're just shooting yourselves in both feet and watching yourself bleed out. Like, it's just dumb. And you create unnecessary controversy and drama within the fan base. But I will say I would push against my team doing that, because if you like a guy so much, then you just take him at number 1. If you think your future, you don't risk he may or may not be there, right? Like to me, that means, again, they didn't have enough conviction in anything. And if you don't have enough conviction in anything,
the guy's Jaden Daniels, though, then you'd be you wouldn't be smart. You would be smart to then go to 3. But like the odds of Jaden Daniels being there for you,
I guess my argument would be, I would be shocked if the Bears evaluate all the tape and they see Jaden Daniels as a better option for them for the next 2 years than Fields. But I do think listen, if they do that scenario, then a lot will just have to depend on how it goes down and what they get for Fields. But I will be frustrated because all it takes is that first game and Caleb Williams goes for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a Washington uniform, and the Bears go and lose week 1 against the Detroit Lions at home. You know what I mean? Like, and Jaden Daniels those 2 picks, and literally the fan base is, you have like a January 6th and we're on the Capitol. You know what I mean? Like, I'm at Hallis Hall with an Indian headdress and a spear. You know what I mean? Like, that's so, and I think the Bears know that. Like, the Bears know they are aware of how volatile the fan base is over this. They're aware. They're not dumb enough to be unaware. So I think that's a real thing they have to be cautionary of. Dan, it's going to be a mess. Can I just go back to, like, in starting to wrap this up? One of the things that kills me with Bears fans, and I'm one of them that says, like, yeah, we've never had a 4,000-yard passer, and we've never had a guy who throws 30 touchdowns and 4,000 yards, in one season, all that. People are like, quarterbacks do that all the time, blah, blah, blah. Well, offense has never been easier, and offense has never been better. And there was only 4 guys who did 4,000 yards and 30 or more touchdowns this year. Can you name them?
This past season?
Yeah.
I don't think Mahomes had 30
touchdown
passes. Well, it was also, as we talked about in the last episode of the year, the backup quarterback. So I'm trying to think who was healthy enough to pull this off. Did Baker do it?
He did not.
Okay, all right. I thought that'd be that.
So
that
I'll give it. It's the list. The list is Dak, Jordan Love, Purdy, and Goff.
All right.
So if you're telling me if in the right system with the right support, Justin Fields is every bit as good as those 4 quarterbacks.
Sure.
In my opinion, Justin Fields is every bit in the right system with the right support as good as those 4 quarterbacks. So, yes, pure talent matters. It matters. And it's great to have. But overall, that mark of this unachievable mark for Chicago Bears quarterbacks, people say they're saying Justin can never do it. I just disagree with that vehemently.
Well, is the stat doing it both in the same season, or it's just I don't think a Bears quarterback has ever thrown 30 touchdowns.
Yes, so they've never had it either. Yeah, they've never had it either. But I'm saying in this world, those guys all threw for 4,000, and those guys all threw for 30 touchdowns. Like Justin could do it then. Like if you support him and your offense works in the way it should, then it could happen. So, and I think Caleb Williams. Again, if you support him and the offense works the way it should, no matter what team he's on, he could be on that list. So it's just one of those things where I keep going back to my gut keeps telling me if the Bears didn't have the number 1 overall pick, we would not be talking about the Bears trading up for a quarterback, and we would not be talking about the Bears drafting. We would not be talking about the Bears drafting Daniels because he fell to them at 9. We would not be talking about the Bears trading back, trading Fields, and drafting J.J. McCarthy. We wouldn't be doing it. Those mock drafts would be mocked. They would be said it's clickbait, it's stupid, it's dumb. The Bears are going to build around Justin for another year and, blah, 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 blah. And I truly believe in the building, they feel that way too. I think in the building, they feel like the reason we brought back Eberflus and we didn't even call Jim Harbaugh is because we see what Detroit just did. And God damn it, the Bears in Detroit are equally awful franchises over the last 30 years. For the most part. The Bears are a little bit better. And you say to yourself, we have just got to get some bleeping stability. We have just got to make a team that you look at that roster and you go, man, I don't want to play that team. That's a really loaded team. And maybe the goal is always to make Justin throw the ball, but hell, if he's got Marvin Harrison Jr. and DJ Moore and a healthy young Cole Kmet and an offensive line we trust, then fine. We're okay with Justin throwing the ball because I think this offense could be really something to play against and be like with Tua in Miami. Like we all agree, if the Dolphins were in this situation, we'd be talking about the same way. You got to take Caleb Williams, you know what I mean? Or hey, but Tua, blah blah blah. Sure. Like it's a similar vibe. Like it's a really similar vibe. But I do think right now, Seattle, Washington, Denver, Atlanta, New England, Vegas, and Minnesota all are desperate for a quarterback. And they all are teams that the Bears should be calling consistently, especially if you could imagine them going back from 1 to 2 and then trading again from 2 to 8 or even 2 to 3. Like if you can do something like what Peter Schrager talked about this morning, no one has a chance to ever do that. And they would have a chance to just completely change the trajectory of their franchise in that way, to where you're a team, you could be the Niners and say, well, plug and play a quarterback. Doesn't matter. This team is so bleeping loaded. So good. Yeah. And that's an exciting place to be in the modern NFL because we just saw a team with a plug and play at quarterback come within a 3rd and 5 from winning the Super Bowl out of the NFC. And so the Bears could do that if they move this way. And again, if the worst thing that happens is they draft a quarterback that Joel Klatt believes is the best quarterback since Andrew Luck, then that's a great thing for the Chicago Bears as well.
Yeah, no question. I'll pose this quick one to you before we end the show officially. I know we'll get to more of your thoughts on Caleb as we dive deeper into
and we'll do our quarterback rankings.
Yeah, but if Caleb is the guy that he's being touted to be, after you do your research and you become more convinced of the narrative that is surrounding his prospects. If that all is true, and let's just say it's Andrew Luck that is available here at the 101, what do you want the Bears to do?
Well, then you draft him. Oh no, you absolutely draft him. If you are done with this, and again, that's why I go back to, you have to evaluate every player.
Yeah.
And if at the end of it, you look and you go, we cannot miss this guy. This guy, I would trade what Carolina traded to go get him because he's going to be that good. Well, then you absolutely draft him, and I'll start building the statue myself in Arlington Heights or on the lakefront. I don't care. When you tell me where it's going to be, I'll build the statue. So that's what you have to do. And then you hope and pray that a team is willing to give you a second-round pick for Justin Fields. So you can then say to yourself, we walked out of the draft with Caleb Williams. We got our second rounder back basically for trading for Montez Sweat. And so what we did to improve our team in a less than a calendar year was Montez Sweat, two second round picks, the best quarterback prospect, and the number 9 overall as well. I mean, you're in a great spot. The number 9 is going to be really interesting though too, because if a quarterback starts to fall, 9 is going to be a great place, again, depending on what the Bears do, if they draft Caleb or if they stick with Justin, to where teams that get needy who are picking later, Seattle, the Raiders, you know what I mean? Like, that's where the Broncos, going from 13 to 9 is big. And truly what I'm reading a lot from draft experts is there's really 7 can't miss guys in this draft. And so the Bears at number 9 would have to be really lucky, it's starting to look like, to get one of those 3 receivers or one of those premier edge rushers. So if they're not there at 9, those phones could be open too. And then that could, the Bears could really continue to build picks in that way as well. I do think, Dan, when you hear rumors about, now the Bears now know what they could get for Justin Fields, or they're making a deal, your make calls of being, until anything's done, this is smokescreen season for the next month, especially. And then it'll ramp up depending on where we are from a month from now, if and when the Bears decide to do something, because in about a month's time is when they traded the pick last year. So we'll see where they're at.
Yeah. No, I mean, you said this is going to be a fluid situation, especially as we get past the combine this week. It's all going to be, basically off and running, and people building their teams with this, increased cap space during the free agency period, finalizing all of these things and looking ahead to the draft. And at that point, that's where we're going to start to see probably things really pick up. I'll be fascinated if we're seeing something done this week. That would be wild. The only move that would be done this week is you trade Justin Fields, because someone's willing to give you value you think is really solid, and you are already really sold on one of the prospects. And if you're willing to do that, again, then that's fine, because it feels like we have clarity within the organization and we're heading in this direction. Can I just say, how hilarious though would it be if the Bears traded last year's number 1 overall pick to the Panthers and got DJ Moore in this slew of picks, and then turned around and the next year got the better quarterback with the Panthers pick, and still had these additional picks from the Panthers and built the team?
It's crazy.
Like, the Panthers would be looking at the Bears saying, we could have been that team. The Bears just go on a run and start having all the success. The Panthers are going to have that shoved in their face for the next decade plus.
They're a nightmare.
It wouldn't be like a Mahomes thing, because, yes, the Bears missed on Mahomes, but so did 10 other teams. But no, this would be like directly the Bears took your picks, Carolina, and just did better with them than you did. That would be insane.
And don't forget, if you are, there are other teams out there, like your Steelers are a sleeper team too. If they start going through the process right now and they're evaluating, and some guys falling at number 9, you know what I mean? Like, there's going to be surprises, and whether that is Justin Fields getting traded soon, or whether that is the number 1 overall pick getting traded, whatever it might be, or there's other teams out there that could make moves up. What if the Patriots already feel really strongly that we don't want to pay what it's going to be to move up, and we don't like taking Jaden Daniels at 3? What if all of a sudden they trade down and they make a move with Atlanta and they say, we're going to move down, we're going to try to go get Russell Wilson and, or whatever it might be. And so, like, it's not just the Bears. The key is the Bears, they hold the start of the dominoes. The dominoes can really start to fall depending on what they do.
They set the tone. It's going to be, that's why we dedicate a whole episode to this, because this decision is very, very important. And I'm sure we'll be doing another episode on this once we find out what happens. Yeah. If there's a trade or whatever comes out of it, that's going to be a massive deal as well.
I feel very strongly that I don't need to speak on this anymore, because I don't think there will be anything else that changes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because
until something does.
People will want to say, like, oh my God, Ryan Poles was meeting with Caleb Williams and they got caught on camera. Like, hey, you look great out there, blah, blah, blah. Like, at a pro day or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. That's going to happen. Like, that is all going to happen. But until actual deal and transaction gets done, whether it's Fields getting traded or the pick getting traded, it's all smokescreen. And I would continue to implore the Bears to pretend they didn't have the number 1 pick. Evaluate this process like you're at number 9. And, hey, we're going to talk to the guys who are going maybe 1 or 2 overall, because we need to do our due diligence to see if we want to mortgage our future to go get those guys. And that's the best way to have clarity going into this process.
Just to put a bow on it, my official thoughts as it stands right now is, unless they could get an absolute can't miss trade package deal from another team, I think they need to use this pick on Caleb Williams. I really like Justin Fields a lot, but I think having the 1 and the 9, having ability to bring in a rookie quarterback with another top pick as well, whatever you can get there. I mean, this is a wide receiver heavy class. Brock Bowers might be available there. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could go if you're Chicago. I think they should, they reset the clock for 1. And I know it's a new head coach and things like that, but and I haven't done deep enough dive into Caleb either. So this is putting some trust out there in the evaluators, but that is my personal opinion on the matter. And that might change, and we'll see what they can get in return, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of spicy offers out there for the Chicago Bears to mull over. But glad we have that all out there. This was much needed, a good cleansing of the show, if you will, to be able to get this all out on the table. And that is our thoughts as we get ready for, this free agency frenzy that's about to come down the pipe pretty soon. So glad we got this all done. And that has been our show here on the Football Lounge. We are brought to you by the For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network. Please go check that out. We got plenty of shows. We've got some NFL content coming down the wire as well. Some mock drafts coming on the way with the crew, free agency predictions, things like that. So be sure to stay tuned for all of that. Give us a like, subscribe. It really helps out with the algorithm. And yeah, we will see you back here on the next episode. Whatever that topic may be, it's probably not going to be as juicy as this one, but hey, crazier things have happened. That's for sure.